very enthusiastic about Buddhism. After some time, their enthusiasm for Buddhism diminished. And they have some trace of their connection, which allows some degree of continuity. But it's hanging on an ever-increasingly thinning thread. That's dependent co-origination. So whether this building will be able to be used for a long time in the future is uncertain. The fact that it has value, that it has function, that it's appreciated, is not a sufficient guarantor of its continuity. So impermanence is the quality of the dynamic flow of experience. That's essentially what it means. Experience is dynamic, but conceptualization, because it rests on abstractions, tends to take a view which is outside time. The search for eternal truths. From the point of view of Buddhism, there are no eternal truths which can be spoken. Emptiness is an eternal truth, but you can't really say anything about it. That is to say, whatever comes into this world is going to be in interaction with other aspects of this world, and therefore is bound to change. It's just bound to change. Therefore, stabilization is impossible, and this is a main reason for impermanence, and for the link between impermanence and suffering. The third factor, the anatta, or the absence of inherent self-nature, means that whatever we see is a manifestation of field factors and not of an internal essence. So, I am James, and there are certain patterns and ways of my being which are recognizable to people who know me. Does that mean that there is some essence of James inside me? We know that if you take a lemon and you squeeze it, you get the lemon juice, and you could say that's the essence of the lemon. Or you can take wine and distill it and make brandy. And you could say that the brandy is a more essential form of the potential of the wine, and that the wine is a more essential form than the grapes that were on the vine. In each stage of that process, you're taking something which has a diffused intensity of flavor, color, and so on, and by compressing it and throwing out what is seen as inessential, something more essential is arrived at. Do we have such an essence? From the Buddhist point of view, they would say we don't. What we are is a particular constellations of patterning, that we have aspects or ingredients, and these ingredients come together in particular patterns according to our interaction with the environment. So we're like a kind of kaleidoscope. The events of the world give the kaleidoscope a turn, and we show that pattern. So we meet people and they tell us a happy story and we feel happy. Their story has just turned the kaleidoscope. Then somebody else tells a sad story, somebody's sick or whatever, and the kaleidoscope's turned again, and we feel differently. If we're very connected with the sad story, our breathing is going to change. Our posture will change. The tone of voice that we have will change. The feelings inside will change. The kind of thoughts we have will change. That is to say, we will be reconstituted. The aspects of ourselves will come together in a different pattern by that interchange. No, that's a very different model, I would suggest, than our ordinary way of thinking about it. Mainly, I think, we imagine we're like a piece of bread. Onto the bread you could put butter, or margarine, or tahini, or hummus, or marmite, or jam. There's 1,000 things you can put on a bit of bread. I'm me, and sometimes I feel happy. Sometimes I feel sad. So the world takes a big spoon of something, dollops it on us and spreads it on the surface. And that's there for a while, and then it goes. But underneath, I'm just me. From the Buddhist point of view, that is a false understanding. That there isn't a fixity of ourselves. What we have is the reiteration or the repetition of storylines whereby we speak ourselves into the continuity of ourselves. And we do this primarily by relying on the power of the first person singular. I am, I feel. And by repeating this again and again, every time we use a sentence with I, it is as if there is a stable entity which is being referred to as I. I feel tired, I feel hungry, I feel happy, I feel I need to go to the toilet, I feel bored. Each of these are qualities or experiences that are happening to me. Me indicates the continuity of this thing that I am, which is influenced and touched and, if you like, molded by events, but nonetheless remains the same. If you imagine a piece of clay, reasonably workable clay, soft and moist, every time you put your hand onto it, it leaves an impact, it leaves a mark. The clay distorts itself according to the pressure and the turn of your hand. But the clay is the clay. You could keep moving it and keep moving it for half an hour, but at the end, the mass of the clay would be the same as at the beginning. A little bit might be on your fingers, but not much. We'd say basically the clay is unchanged by these manipulations. The form of that the clay is showing has changed, but the clay itself remains the same. And I think that's often how we think about ourselves. In the course of my life, so many things have happened to me. Sometimes I've been like this, sometimes I've been like that. And here I am, still the same old me. But it's not true. It's not true. What is this real continuity? Buddhism certainly would be stupid to deny that there's any continuity, because we can remember our lives, certainly bits of it. There is continuity, but the continuity is not the continuity of an essence, but of the patterning of the manifesting of our potential. That is to say, due to various circumstances, we have been able to express ourselves in different ways. So if you grew up in a household that was a bit strict and controlling, and you learned to mind your P's and Q's, that builds a particular hesitancy into your way of being in the world. There's a kind of anxiety about getting it wrong. And that personality trait usually continues quite long into life. If you've grown up in a family where there was a lot of permission to do as you choose, that's going to have probably given you a freedom of exuberant expression, and that trait is likely to continue. Is that particular orientation of your personality arising from something you brought into the world? Well, some people who take a very reductive reading of DNA would say it is. It's developed out of particular genetic patterning. But the likelihood of being able to prove that is very, very small. Rather, we see there is a potential, and the potential has come into a conversation with the mood of the environment, and the potential has taken on particular patterns of responding according to the causes and conditions of our family, our school, and so on. So these patterns feel like me. They are me. This is how I am, how I show myself, how I can be known to other people, because this is what I'm presenting. And yet, this essential me was interpersonally formed. It hasn't come up from some kind of seed like a plant. It's come about through interaction with a particular environment. And if we had been born in different families, we would have developed in different ways. So that's very, very important to see, oh, what I take to be essential about myself actually is not. This is the absolute basis of change in psychotherapy. One of the main forms of resistance to change is the belief that I am what I am. This is me. If somebody strongly has that view, it's very difficult to help them, because they just are convinced, how could I be anything other than myself? Most psychotherapies spend some time looking at the development of patterns through childhood experience. And the purpose of that is to say, this has arisen due to causes and circumstances. It is not innate, it is not essential, but as it manifests currently as who you are, it is impactful on the environment and elicits certain kinds of response which you can take to be confirming that this is indeed the definitive notion of who you are. So, for example, if you grew up in a very, what should we call it, dysregulated family, where your behavior becomes chaotic because the parental influence was chaotic. As you bring your chaos out into the world, most people will be a bit wary of that, and so you get quite a lot of rejection. And then you feel, I'm being rejected, nobody likes me, there's something wrong with me. I'm bad. Well, there is something wrong with you, which is you're not very good at regulating your behavior in the social field. So you bang into other people. That is behavioral. It doesn't speak of any essence at all. But once you put it in the distillation machine and you get drop, drop, drop of this moralized essence, I am a bad person, I am unlovable, nobody likes me, that creation of these core negative beliefs creates a sense of the impossibility of change. So this is what the absence of inherent self-nature in Buddhism is looking at as one of its aspects. There is no defining essence, but patterns have both continuity and impact. You can change the pattern, you can diminish its impact, and you can change its trajectory. Who is the one who can do that? Yourself. You can only make the change if you believe that yourself is a potential and not an essence. Do you see? This is the point where we have to stand in relation to ourselves. We have to keep an eye on ourselves. We have to see what we're up to and think, oh, I'm running the same old story again. On the basis of that belief, people don't like me, or I don't know what to say, or I'm socially anxious, or I can't dance. On the basis of this belief, I'm making decisions about how close I go to other people or how far away. And because this pattern is being repeated again and again, it seems to be true in itself. But it's only true performatively or repetitively. That's the essential beginning of freedom. If I don't keep repeating it, it won't be happening. That's fairly simple. So when a little child is picking its nose, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But I have to do something like my... You don't know, you can have a handkerchief. No, but I have to... And I like doing it, and I might even eat it. That is somebody identified with something because it feels like them, just like sucking a thumb. It's easier to spot these things in children because they're very kind of naked in displaying themselves. But we all have these kind of patterns on more subtle levels, like how we like to make our cup of tea, how we like to have a bath, how high the water should be, what temperature the water should be, and so on. And this sort of ritualizing of existence is a way of confirming, this is who I am. In fact, what it's confirming is the repetition of a pattern. So, again, if we look, say, at these flowers, these are arising due to dependent co-origination. Because there is a market for flowers, there are people who produce flowers. So they produce them in some other country or under particular condition. They're either grown in some heated greenhouse, or they're coming in from a country which is warm enough to allow roses and so on to blossom at this time. Many things go into that. Aeroplanes, for example. So nowadays we get flowers often coming from Africa. If you didn't have reasonably cheap cargo flights, you wouldn't be able to have these flowers at a price that people are likely to pay. So you have the history of aviation, you have the nature of exchange agreements, currency exchanges and so on between African countries and Britain. You have the development of markets. I would imagine these are probably more likely to be grown, if they do come from Africa, in a country which is one of our old colonies than in a country which is a former French colony, because there would be particular kinds of trade links and so on. So when we look into what something is, we see embedded in it are many, many pathways and tracks of interaction. And the flowers being here is a manifestation of an incredibly complex sequence of events. When we take our scissors and cut around the flowers, we make them self-existing entities. Oh, these are nice roses. They are what they are. But they're only here because of all these invisible circumstances. And this is the same for every kind of phenomena, whether it's the shape of our body, whether it's the amount of education we have, whether it's our particular neurotic patterns, whether it's our hopes and fears. All of these are patterns which have arisen in relation to the environment. They don't speak of any true defining essence within them. The more we see that, the world is both less reliable, because things aren't what they appear to be, and yet it's also more amenable to our interaction. Because if there is a plasticity in the world, if the world is movable, then we can participate in something which shifts. When the world is very fixed, it's much more difficult to know how to do that. So, for example, when I was a child in Glasgow, if you went into a park, there were always these men wandering around with whistles, the parkie. And as soon as you went on the grass or tried to climb a tree, they'd blow the whistle and shout at you, and you had to leave the park. This was not much fun, because their job was to protect the grass. As we know, grass is extremely fragile and sensitive and gets very upset when people walk on it. That was a particular social construct at that time. Probably in the whole of Britain now you won't find any parks where people are not allowed to walk on the grass. Has something changed in the nature of grass? Has it suddenly become more robust? Has it developed ego strength and resilience? Has it had psychotherapy? The grass has been reframed according to shifts in the culture. So what is permissible at one period is not permissible at another. There's no essence in the grass. There's no essence in the function of the park attendant. These things are being defined and redefined endlessly in this process of the evolution of the culture. How shall I behave? This is the central question. What can I rely on? Buddhism generally begins with the taking of refuge. That we want to find something we can hold on to. Why? Because the phenomena in the world, or samsara, are very unreliable. They don't have any truth to them. What is it in Dharma or Buddhism that is reliable? It is emptiness. The Buddha is the Buddha because he understood emptiness. The Dharma is the Dharma because, or the truth or the path, because it speaks of emptiness. And the Sangha are useful because they understand something about emptiness. So, what is emptiness? Emptiness means simply that you can't find any essence in anything. It's empty of essence. It's empty of internal self-definition. So when we look at the roses, just as when we looked at the statue before, we see yellow roses in a vase. The yellowness of the rose is in the rose. But we are saying yellow. And for each of us, the color yellow will have different connotations. For some, this yellow might feel quite warm. For others, it might feel quite cold. We will have our own aesthetic response to what is there. Now, again, going back to the clay or the piece of bread, do we say, but the roses are there. I quite accept that you are entitled to have your own opinion, your own response to the rose, but that's something which is being projected onto the rose. The rose exists, and then you wrap it around with your interpretation. From the point of view of emptiness, this only goes halfway. Actually, there is nothing there. What appears for us is a constructed experience, and without our participation, there wouldn't be a yellow rose. That the yellow rose has a significance that comes into the world or reveals itself according to our interaction with it. In Indian philosophy, this is a very old question. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody hears it fall, does it make a sound? If there is no ear to hear, what is a sound? Because a sound is an experience registered by somebody who hears it. Without hearing, there is no sound. It's an assumption, an inference. Having heard trees fall and the thump that they make when they hit the ground, I can infer that that tree will make a thumping sound when it hits the ground, therefore it made a sound. That's a mental construction. You can only know if it makes a sound if you hear it, because sound without hearing is
not sound.
It's not sound. It's not sound. Just as if we close our eyes and we don't see what's in the room, the quality of the room as revealed through our eyes is missing for us. You can say it's there, but it's irrelevant, because this room is experience, and each of us has our own unique experience of the room, according to where we're sitting, whether in a chair or on the floor, according to whether we've been here before or not, according to our own stories of making sense of environments. So emptiness doesn't mean there is nothing there. It means what we exist in is a world of appearance. And that appearance arises as experience, and there are no entities involved. That is to say, reification, the mental process of creating entities, is not just applied to abstractions, but applies to everything in the world. So, for example, if you were doing, a degree in philosophy and you had a section on ethics, you might have an essay to write on what is love. So you can read lots of books about love. Love is da-da-da-da-da. Aquinas says love is da-da-da-da-da. And we're talking about love. Where do you find love? What shops sell love? What museums have little exhibits of love so you can go and test whether your concept fits it? You know, we have the national measurement of the yard, and you can go to the place where it's kept, and this is the definitive notion of what is a yard. But love is not like that. So we, with our minds, talk of love as if it's a motor car or an orange. But even if you say an orange, then what kind of orange? What family of orange? Or this orange. So when you look at an orange, is the orangeness of the orange revealed in what you see or in what you know about it? Once you start putting the stories onto the orange, you're turning it into a thing as a member of a particular family of fruit that's been highly developed and cultivated by human beings. There is no essence to the orange. Traditional Indian examples for this are the banana tree. If you've ever seen a banana tree, it's made up of layers and layers. It's a bit like, they also use the example of the onion. When you slice into an onion, there is no big seed in the middle, like in an avocado. There is just layer after layer of onioning. So what is the heart or center or essence of the onion? The onion is the operating together of these various layers of this fiber holding in the moisture. You can't find an inside essence to the onion. In the same way, with the flowers, you can't find an essence. We could start to take the petals off one of the rose to find out what's in the middle. And then we see this the stamen and so on. But then we don't have the rose. The rose is the co-presencing of all the elements of the rose. When these factors are operating together, we have what we call a rose. In the same way, with our bodies, does the body have an essence? Clearly we have vital organs. If the liver collapses, that's a big problem. If the kidneys go, a big problem. The heart, the brain, and so on. There are certain things we can't do without. You can lose a foot, and if you get some treatment early enough, you won't die. But there are critical organs which, if you lose them, you vanish. Could you say they are the essence of who you are? They are an important part of it. Their functioning is important. Now, the heart goes pum pum, pum pum, pum pum. If it stops doing that, it's not much use. So, the heart is a function, the liver is a function, the kidneys are a function, the brain is a function. What we call our body is a complex field of functioning, that is to say, of processes of communication. You can look at it in terms of things. You can say, this is the liver, this is the heart. And you can see drawings of a heart, and you can see descriptions of the importance of electric currents and so on, and disorders of the heart. And there are many medical textbooks on that. But the heart, as it's in our body, is a function linked to other functions. The body itself is a communicative system, but it's not a closed system. It's an open system. So breathing in and out, the pores of the skin, information coming through the senses, food and liquid through the mouth, urine and feces going out for excretion. This is the movement of the body. The body is a dynamic site of participation in the environment